Welcome to Season 2 of Extra Extra, the podcast where we dig deep into how businesses can prioritize their most valuable asset, their people. Last season, we cracked open the EX playbook, and this time we're rewriting the rules. Join us for candid conversations where there are no cliches, no jargon, and no one-size-fits-all solutions. Just real talk about what's reshaping the employee experience landscape. So if you want to get to the heart of what makes workplaces tick, just hit that subscribe button and let's get started. Stephanie, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. We're going to be talking a lot about EX, I feel. And it's a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. And I know for a fact that you are too. So what would be great is if you could just start by giving a quick introduction to yourself, and we'll hit the ground running from there.
Thanks for having me. Listen, I'm an EX professional. I started as an EX leader, building up an EX team back in 2016 when I was at Accenture, and more recently have become an advisor in this space to many organizations who are wanting to progress meaningfully. My official role, I'm managing director at TI People. TI People is an employee experience consultancy that has also been around since about 2016. And I like to say that what I do is I work with leaders who want to systemically improve work experiences for people. And they want to do this in a continuous way. They want to do this in a scaled way. And I want to do this with leaders who see the power of this as a discipline and as a business value driver. I think I also love the challenge of working with leaders who don't see it that way yet today. I know there are many out there who may think this isn't as essential as so many are claiming, but that challenge of starting with a business problem that any leader wants to solve and showing them how their people's experience is directly connected to it is a challenge I really enjoy.
I would like to ask a very quick question on what you just said.
Yeah.
What is the split of the leaders who believe this is important versus those that don't?
Okay. Good question. I'll pull on a stat that we have from our recent report, a State of EX report. I'll tell you more about that as we keep going. But right now, it seems like 65% of respondents to this survey feel that their leaders view EX as a priority of equal importance to anything else on their agenda. 65% of leaders.
Wow.
Now, I think that stat is inflated because it's one thing to say it's important. It's another to change how you make decisions, how you prioritize work, how you allocate funds, how you measure your organization's performance based on this. And I think in reality, the percentage is much lower. And so that's what we're going with. We're going with people thinking it's a priority in a slight majority, but them still not completely understanding how to change the way their organizations operate in support of this.
You started TI People when in 2016. So since then, if you'd done the State of EX report back then versus today, where you have 65% people saying that they prioritize EX, in 2016, do you think that the number would have been as high?
Absolutely not. I think in 2016, this discipline was in its infancy. People were still learning what a focus on this could mean and look like in their organizations. So definitely not. I will not guess a percentage because we didn't collect this data point then, but we're seeing a steady increase. Even just between last year and this year, we're seeing 10 to 13 percentage points increase in that data point. So the value of managing EX is increasing, undoubtedly, and it's something that we want to help organizations figure out how to execute upon.
I think what was interesting is, and I had a chance to browse some of the work that people are putting out there as well. From my experience, a lot of times EX is, I would say, lip service, just the fact that people are saying that it's important. And I'm being very brutally honest over here, but when you start peeling the onion, it really is at a stage in many companies where they're not sure how to even describe EX or how to make meaning of EX, right?
Yep.
So in your work, why is this happening? Are you seeing this happening? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing as far as EX is concerned and getting its space and time in the organization?
So these first few eras of EX as a discipline have been, yeah, a lot of lip service and a lot of bandwagoning. A lot of people feeling like, we've got this. We fully get it. We know how to excel in this space. And I think people have done that, have believed that, because I think it's been an easy language change in some instances to say, we're no longer the HR function, we're the people experience function. And so there's been a lot of painting over your old language and your old identity and just saying, yeah, we've got it. Now, the reality is, I think we're hitting a point where organizations are going beyond this false confidence. Like, I think many who are in this space, especially people who are EX leaders in this space, are looking at their organization and they're saying, we're not as good as we think we are. And it's time that we get past this stage of overconfidence and get really serious about what does it mean to be an organization that can rigorously manage our people's experience, rigorously improve them over time in a scaled way. And that's bringing up very big questions in not only EX leaders' minds, but also the people they are interacting with and serving in the organization. And it's creating real tension, and it's positive tension, of course, but it's leading, I think, a lot of, let's say, EX leaders who are trying to push forward on this agenda. It's leading them to feel like there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what is EX and how do we get better at it, that is being unwound now. And people are finally pushing past the superficial, and they're getting into the weeds of, what does this take for us to be excellent at? And I think a lot of EX leaders are struggling with conveying that clearly, and they're struggling with organizational buy-in. We're seeing this a
Yep.
lot in our data. People are like, yeah, I get it, but I don't want to change how I work
Right.
in support of this. And so that's a lot of what I'm seeing as people try and punch through these initial years in this discipline.
One of the things from the State of EX report which caught my eye was, there's mentioned the agility related challenge, which was basically moving from discussion into action, right? And that is, I think, hits the nail on the head, because there's been so much talk about just defining EX to start with. Like we said, everyone's got their own definition, but eventually you have to move into action. Do you see that now people are, or companies rather, are getting more and more equipped and willing to spend the money, to put the team together, to put the resources in place to actually get that discussion out of the boardroom and into actual action?
No matter whose report in this space you read, you'll see people's challenge with action. Okay. Taking as much action as employees expect is coming up time and time again as something that organizations are struggling with. And I think one of the reasons why people are disappointed with the level of action is because so much listening unfolds in organizations, so much research unfolds in organizations, that employees are expecting equal amounts of action. And what we're seeing is actually lots of listening go nowhere, lots of research not culminate in real change and real interventions, maybe for one major reason that has a lot to do, as you said, Debbie, with this idea that people are trying to drive such big change that it often hits what I like to call like organizational quicksand. Like, you are trying to do so much for so many people that inevitably this falters. And I think the advice we've been giving organizations when it comes to agility is, how do you think about reducing the scope of any given effort, even reducing the size of the employee population you're trying to improve an experience for. I know that may sound contentious to some, but you're better off having great impact on one population as opposed to no impact on a large population. And when you use agile principles to make this work smaller, speedier, you will inevitably reach velocity. You will inevitably increase your ability to act. Agile principles that need to be adopted. The other thing is, I think people really struggle with understanding who should be acting on what. We're often like looking at this problem thinking, oh, we're all concerned in some way, but who's directly on point to solve this? And one thing we advocate for is getting incredibly clear on who owns which part of which experience and who should go make what better. And when you have that clarity, people can go do well by the feedback employees are giving. But until then, it feels really difficult to almost divide and conquer.
But actually, that again brings up something that I keep talking about a lot. What you said is find people who own a certain experience and then enable them
Yeah.
to be able to deliver a better experience, whatever that may be. I think what I'm trying to get at is very often there's this misconstrued notion that EX is an HR problem. And it's only HR who's responsible for everything EX. But if you think about it, you have to have your facility, your IT teams, your administrative teams, your financial teams, all of them kind of pulling together in the same direction and delivering an experience for one individual, right? It's not just HR, it's your managers, it's your leadership, it's everyone. So how are you working with organizations to overcome this sort of misunderstanding and to enable everyone to understand that it's a joint responsibility?
You're spot on, Kiran. Like EX is inherently cross-functional, and I use this expression. EX is not an HR sport, it's an enterprise-wide sport. And the moment you understand that, you're able to start getting really specific about who owns what. So in order for you to do that, you need to stop thinking about this big thing called EX, and you need to say, what are the component parts of our people's experience here? And often one thing we do with organizations is to clarify the universe of moments that make up people's experience. And when you start doing that, you're able to say something like, oh, there's of course a set of moments that have to do with people as they are recruited to this organization and join it. And you can look at these moments and you can say, you own this set of moments, you own this journey, you are responsible for making sure this moment and the experience delivered in this moment is ever increasing. So you can talk about ownership at these levels, and then you can talk about touch points that enable these moments, right? The reality is you may own the delivery of a moment. You may be responsible for making sure it goes well, but many people serve you in that moment. And so here's one example. You're applying to a company. People may easily be able to identify that whoever's at the helm of talent acquisition owns this moment. IT serves this leader when it comes to the career page or the job application page. And if that touch point isn't performing well, these owners need to have data that suggests, I need you to go do better for us to improve the experience in this moment. And you start being able to create real clarity of who should go make what better in a way that is impossible if you stay up here. And if you just say things like, this function owns EX, or we're at too high of a level when we talk about ownership. And I think specificity is where this will really start making sense for people, and where it will become obvious that it is the day job of specific people to go make some of these things better, whether it is the process, IT, the roles enabling that experience, and so on.
Yeah, I love that because, and this is something that's come up multiple times before as well. Like you said, it is a team sport. And when you watch any match, everyone's got a role to play. And you can see the person who's not really collaborating and cooperating, right? And that's what should be happening within the company as well. But unfortunately, EX hasn't exactly made it to individual KPIs yet, right?
Mm.
Like that whole the need to, okay, have you contributed? Have you done this? Because it has to become a company wide mandate. And I think we're a little far away from that happening, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of organizations might say something like, no, we have EX metrics in our
Mm.
KPIs and OKRs, but they're often very high level data points, right? It'll
Yeah.
be an overall engagement score, it'll be an overall journey NPS score. That is too high level because, yet again, too many people are contributing to that.
Mm.
And what you need is to go lower and say, this CSAT, this percentage favorability of this touch point in this moment are what I will make sure are improving over time. And when you have that, then everyone knows their role in this equation. So we're definitely needing to see more of that if organizations are going to treat employee experience as a rigorous discipline that is part of management, that is part of how you manage a business.
But is there a better way to do that than just scoring? Is there a way to directly correlate it to business and financial impact, where even the
Uh,
CFO is extremely happy that EX is the top priority? How does that happen?
mm. Okay, so Kiran, you're putting your finger on one of the top challenges that EX teams and leaders are facing, and even more
Hmm.
broadly, HR functions sometimes are facing, which is connecting the impact of an experience improvement on downstream business and financial outcomes. And
Yep.
there's a few reasons this is difficult, okay? First of all, it's not always prioritized. I think there are a lot of
Hmm.
teams out there who think, I don't need to make that connection to ROI. Leaders will see the benefit. The reality is we're living in really tough times, are not shy to look down their list of costs and say, this is out because
Oh, yeah.
I don't see the value, the direct business value. So one may have not been prioritized. Two, people first and foremost even struggle with getting data about the experience they've been trying to improve. So if you can't have data about what you've been trying to improve, how are you going to go connect that data point to downstream business and financial data points? You won't be
Right.
able to.
Give me an
The third
example of
challenge,
that data point, though.
yeah. Okay, I'll give you an example of the data points. Your experience metric, okay, might be something like, let's go back to a moment like I apply to your company. What is the CSAT of that moment?
Hmm.
Okay. What is the customer, the internal customer's
Sure.
satisfaction with that moment? And how have the interventions you've put in place moved that up this year or over the
Right.
last sort of few months? So you might be able to say something like, these efforts led to a 5% increase in CSAT on this moment.
Hmm.
And thanks to this, we're going to go look at downstream, often people, operational, or customer outcomes that may have moved in parallel. And what's really difficult is to connect them causally. Like you can observe trends more often than not and say, hey, we improved the experience in this moment and our candidate throughput went up. Or, hey,
Right.
we improved the experience in this moment and we were able to retain people in this tenure range much more.
Yep.
And so making these first people outcomes is an important start, but then people wonder, yes, and what about business and financial outcomes? I think there's a big cost angle that a lot of people want to tie to often, and that's a really important one. But I think
Hmm.
more and more wanting to connect to downstream customer NPS metrics and to downstream enterprise productivity metrics are a real goal for a lot of leaders. And it's not easy, but the one thing that we've been advising people to do to get better at this is to make friends with finance.
Hmm.
Because One thing we learned in this research, in this state of EX research, is that EX teams, EX leaders, they don't partner with finance. In fact, they are the last function
Right.
they will
Yeah.
partner with. And this absence of a partnership is making it really difficult for EX teams to have the know-how and have the data to make this a reality. So we're encouraging people to go make friends.
But is it also lack of skills, maybe? Because we do know
Absolutely.
there's the correlation you're talking about, like connecting the dots. It takes a lot of doing. And often, especially if EX has been put on the HR team and HR is suddenly told that, okay, EX is also something you need to worry about, they don't have the capacity or the ability to do all of this. It's a lot of work.
It is. I definitely think that know-how and ability is a big challenge here. And that's why we're saying go make friends with people who have the analytical abilities to do this and who have access to the type of data you need
Mhm.
to create these linkages and who are really good judges of what will pass the test of credibility. I think a lot of teams may say things like, my effort led to that decrease in attrition or that decrease in cost. But I think sometimes these linkages are weak in the minds of finance leaders who are saying, you can't claim you can't claim attribution for all of that. So how do you become even more credible at saying, you know what? We did our homework.
Yeah.
Here is the amount of that reduction we can claim, or here's the amount of that percentage increase we can claim. And all of this ties back to really treating experience management as a hard-edged, data-driven discipline and moving in that direction increasingly.
Yeah, I think also with this whole onset of EX, I think what's also happening is, and I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, HR is starting to become a lot more techno-functional, but at the same
Mm.
time also business-driven, right? It's not just about the software aspects; it's actually about business metrics. It's about being tech driven. It's about understanding processes and mapping processes, because some of the examples you were giving on EX and breaking it down into more micro-sized processes. I think doing that is a fairly challenging ordeal for sort of team who's never done that before,
Mm.
right? From a business process management perspective, you would probably have HR teams bringing in consultants trying to do that. But I think what I'm starting to see is there's a greater need for people teams to start thinking that way on a daily basis rather than just on a project by project need basis, right? So every day
Yeah.
you're thinking about how you can improve the process, how you can create and redesign EX. And I think what weirdly happens is while HR is trying to build these processes for the people, they very often don't include the people.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think that's the weird conundrum of where HR teams are. They're doing all of this for the people, but very often the employees are not consulted, are not part of the process. It's like saying I'm doing a customer survey without the customer involved, right?
Yeah.
So I think what was your take on that, and how do you see organizations making that transition and involving the community as well?
Yeah. You are calling out an important finding from this year's research, which is as much as we all want to believe that this
Hmm.
sort of EX revolution in organizations has meant that people are co creating with employees, the numbers are still really low. And what we found is that 31% of respondents are actually involving employees in the co-creation of solutions that will affect their
Wow,
experience.
that's
So
fairly
that's a
low.
very pretty low number when you think that in reality, these employees have the best understanding of what's getting in their way at work and what could make it better. Now, I think a lot of, I'll say, cross-functional leaders who look into this work may assume that they've involved people. They may say,
Hmm.
I asked them in upfront research. I put out a survey, I did interviews, I'm involving them. But it's one thing to involve them in that stage of work. It's another to co-create an intervention, a solution with them. And when that stage hits, what we're often seeing is HR and other supporting functions defaulting to what I like to call like management knows best or experts know best mentalities, where these people are saying, I know this process better than anyone. I'm going to go fix it. I don't need employees. I don't need to bother them. I don't need to take them off the line to help me fix this. I've got it. And that is a historical way of working and thinking that we have to keep chipping away, because what it's leading to is lots of effort and lots of attempts at improving experience that don't always move the needle. And there's two things we've been telling people to try and keep pushing past this obstacle. One is consider employee co-creation in even the smallest of ways. Not everything has to be a full day workshop where you've invited 20 employees. Think about involving 1, 2, 3 people in a 30-minute working session, and you'll have already gotten insight and input that will drastically change the arc of what you create. And the second thing we say is make sure you really elevate the impact of situations where you have involved employees and show people how much better your results have been. Because I think a lot of organizations have stories of failed attempts at change where they didn't involve people. And people said, I didn't want this in the first place, or you didn't understand my challenge. And so keep making that contrast between the times where you didn't do it and the times where you did involve them, and keep changing people's minds with that type of approach.
I know we're running out of time, so I do want to ask you this one question. During times of plenty, you'll have trees that will flower. So I think of EX as that, where there's a lot happening and things are looking good. And therefore, you have these wonderful initiatives and projects coming up for the welfare and for everyone's well-being in general. But during the winter, you drop your leaves and you do not flower anymore. And I feel like there's a sense that's what's coming, where companies are cutting down on everything else and preserving and conserving all that energy to run core functions. You see EX, ever becoming part of that core, or do you still see it as an extra?
Love this question. I think you're right that EX still is perceived as a nice to have in organizations. And the only way it will make its transition into the core is if we start talking about EX not only as creating delightful moments, but if we start thinking about EX as removing friction from people's day-to-day at work that will allow them to be more productive, deliver better to our customers, and so on. And I think people don't always think about that angle of what a great experience allows for.
That's interesting.
And so we talk with a lot of business leaders. What is getting in the way of their people at work? And that's EX. As I am trying to handle a customer complaint, as I am trying to help a patient, as I am trying to, whatever it is I'm trying to do at work, that is my experience. And if there is friction getting in my way, a lot of pain will be felt in downstream business goals that aren't reached. And so I think we need to start thinking about talking about EX in different ways to business leaders. And that will, and when we are having these conversations, business leaders are saying, oh yeah, I need this. I need this kind of focus because we've not paid much attention to what's getting in the way of our people at work. And if we do, we will be better for it from a business and financial perspective. I think the one thing I'll say is EX leaders need to figure out, in some instances, a new talk track for this discipline. They need to know how to flex it to the realities of the business and be incredibly plugged into what the organization is trying to achieve.
I love this point because as I'm thinking about it, it also means that even a simple solution that is not traditionally HR.
Yeah,
Could be something that helps customer support executives find answers faster and get trained faster so that they're more responsive and spend less time on each ticket. That is potentially EX as well. Then.
exactly.
Right.
And the reality
Yeah.
is, if a business leader thinks that EX equals HR, then they will never believe that this is
Yep.
an angle to pursue. And so what we're saying is, if they don't expect the HR function to serve them in that way, and the reality is actually business leaders are experience owners when it comes to the day-to-day of work. And so
Yep.
going back to this cross-functional nature of this construct, if you're clear that the business leader in a unit is responsible for making experiences of day-to-day work better and less frictionless and seamless, they will see the power of pulling on this lever called EX. And you don't even need to call it that if you don't want, but
Yeah.
pulling on
Yeah.
this lever to help them achieve what their business is after. And that's why there's this need to shake off preconceptions of what EX is in a lot of organizations.
So I think as we wrap up, perhaps my last question then is, what do you think is going to happen over the next 2 years? Do you think this is going to start moving away from these preconceived notions, or are we still going to be fighting the EX fight with HR?
I really think we're at a moment of reckoning. I think people are seeing the potential for leaning into this discipline, and they don't want it to be lip service, as we've established. No more lip service. Let's be serious about what this discipline can be. And I think they're going to lean into sort of, again, this rigor when it comes to, I'll say two things, actually. One is fighting impact. We spoke about how not enough action is being taken, not enough change is being driven. I think people are starting to obsess about making sure that any EX related effort culminates in visible impact on people, measurable impact on people, that is then proven. And I think the more EX leaders and practitioners lean into that, the more this will elevate the importance of this kind of work, the more it will, as you said, Debbie, have a chance at entering into the core of rigorous business disciplines. But people need to really get their act together and do this work in more impactful ways. And that's not easy. I've been a practitioner in this space, but it's going to take a lot of creativity and a real ability to punch through what are organizational barriers and inertia. So really a tall order, but I think that's the course this discipline can take in a lot of organizations.
I do have one last question, which is a one-word answer, which is, should EX leaders be HR or not?
You didn't tell me you'd be asking this question, but if I was given a chance to go create the perfect EX leader role, I would not put it in HR these days. Because
Who would he or she report to?
honestly, there are a lot of options when it comes to that question, but not many organizations have CXOs, like chief experience officers.
Right.
So that's an obvious reflection, but they don't always have it. But I think there are increasingly options to have these roles report into broader corporate functions or even operations organizations. I think there's a real opportunity for this role to not start where most people expect it to be, because we learned from last year's State of EX that 70% of EX leaders do sit in HR. And as we've spoken about in this conversation, there's a real struggle with breaking through and beyond this function. So why not try putting this somewhere that gives you a chance at already starting from a cross-organizational vantage point, as opposed to a function-specific one. And I want to be clear. This doesn't mean that people who sit in HR can't do great work. A lot of EX leaders can do excellent work sitting in the HR function because let's be honest, the HR function does own many parts of the employee experience. They just need to be really creative at flexing their cross organization sort of muscle and building buy-in across the organization. That's my take these days.
I think that's a
So,
really fair and really good answer because I think we agree as well. Stephanie, before we go, do you want to tell our listeners where they can find the State of EX report? I love the title, by the way, so many stakeholders, so little time. If you want to just quickly tell us.
Yeah. You can go to the TI People website, ti-people.com to find this report. And if you want to read more from us, you can follow us on LinkedIn, follow me, add me on LinkedIn. Very happy to connect with anyone who is wanting to really challenge the status quo in this space and make this discipline all that it can be. So thanks for the opportunity to chat today.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
thanks so much, Stephanie.